Welcome to the Leadership Roundtable, a podcast with Dr. Conway Edwards, where our goal is to help you increase your leadership capacity. Let's get ready for today's episode. Topic of leading and departing and what it looks like to actually close the back door. Everybody wants to know that.
Absolutely. I think a lot of churches have the problem of people leaving. For one reason or another, 10% of your church will leave every single year, whether they got a job out of town, whether they just don't like your theology anymore, whether they are mad at a relationship, whether they believe God's calling them to somewhere else. But you will realize that about 10% of your church will leave every single year. If it's more than that, then there's probably something critically wrong in your church, and we need to figure out how to address that. And so today we're trying to help you understand and process what it looks like and how to close the back door. Andy, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just heard this in one of our leadership meetings just yesterday. Hopefully that person's not in the room right now. They said that they were sharing that God had called them to leave their current church and go to another church, come to our church. And it made me wonder, did God really ask you to just up and leave your church?
Don't you love that one? I love to hear when people say that, because I love to ask them a couple questions. I would say, you do realize that if you leave one church and come to ours, we should be very careful. That's right. Because since you have that pattern, you might soon leave our church and go to another too. So I usually like to ask that question first. And then number two, I like to ask, did you leave well? You know what I mean? How did you leave? If I call the pastor today, is he going to say, I'm weeping because they left? Or will it be a joyful, grateful to God today?
A releasing.
Yeah, a joyful releasing. Or is there an unresolved issue? I usually tell people that if you are excited about leaving, it's probably the wrong time to leave. It means that there's something that has not been resolved that you are just glad you get to leave and not be a part of anymore, which means God probably still has some heart work inside of you for him to do inside of you before you leave.
But I mean, for me, I just thought it was interesting. God told me to do that. But I think a lot of times people leave churches and they leave, it says here, burned out, overlooked, or simply disengaged. And I think the challenge is a lot of times when somebody feels burned out, overlooked, or disengaged, they tend to think, well, God must not want me here. Yeah. Like God doesn't want you ever to be tired, overlooked, or disengaged. Like that's not the whole experience of the New Testament believer. But it's a reality that people do that. It says 78% of people have left roles due to feeling unnoticed. And really, that's on us or unsupported. That's really on us as church leaders. So we've got a massive problem.
Absolutely, we do. And I think one of the reasons they said here is that we don't engage people. And there are too many pastors, ministry leaders, volunteers that enjoy their roles so much they forgot what it was like when they didn't have a role when they were coming in. And so they forgot what it's like to feel like walking in the door for the first time. And because you don't realize that every person that walks through the door, your church cannot get to where God wants them to go to unless they use their gifts. God's given everybody a gift. It's our job to then engage them and give them the opportunity to use that gift, even if it means your role is minimized and theirs is maximized. And too many people wear their ministry role as if they're there forever and will never look for a replacement or somebody to come alongside them and help them. What are you thinking, Andy?
I agree. I think we don't engage, and we don't always treat it like it's their God-given gifting or calling. Sometimes we treat them like they're a spot to fill on a weekend. And
people feel that.
They feel it. And one of the ways I know it, and I'm guilty of this, you may have been guilty too, you call a leader or a volunteer and you ask them how everything's going. And if you ask them how everything's going and they answer you with, well, I called 10 people today, I did this, I did that. If you ask them how they're doing and they answer you with results, that is very telling on how your conversations normally go with them.
Yeah.
Because I called somebody recently and I really wanted to know how they were doing, but they answered with all the results, and that shows that our relationship has been transactional.
Yeah.
And I haven't cared for them So that I told on myself because I'm seeing how are you doing, and they're coming at results. And that just says that's all they're used to me asking about.
That's really good.
And that's a setup for exactly what we see here.
Yeah.
When people think that you're just coming for that, and you're going to have a revolving door.
And the problem with that is it slows ministry down, right?
Yeah.
So you want to do ministry at a fast pace, but you cannot forget the pastoral side of caring for people. And the challenge with that is then you have to slow down enough to make sure that you're asking the pastoral questions or you're checking in once a week, which is also why, Pastor Matt, you can't have that many direct reports. Because if you have that many direct reports, if you're on staff, if you have that many direct reports, then you cannot handle the span of pastoral care with all of them, which is also why you need to develop and train your people to do the same thing you're doing for the people right beneath you.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
And
what
you got some warning signs here. These are the
Yep.
red flags that are waving.
Yep.
Before people leave, they show signs. And you've got 5 signs here.
Well, no, before you even go there, though, I think we get so ministry related
Yeah.
that oftentimes we're not even looking at the cues people are giving us.
Yeah.
They're giving us cues all the time.
Yeah.
They're giving us cues with whether or not they call us right back or if they wait a week to call us back. They're giving us cues as to whether when you look at them and you say, hey, how you doing today? And they said, fine. And it's a quick fine to get to the mission. They're giving us these cues all the time. And oftentimes we just ignore them because we're so mission focused, and we've got to be careful about that. So let's see. What are some
We
of
got
these
to be
signs?
looking for them. The first
Yep.
one is missed meetings without notice.
My
Or I would say
God.
missed meetings with short notice.
Right, yeah.
I don't even like to answer my phone 5 minutes before a meeting.
Well, yeah, nobody, people don't call me 5 minutes before a meeting. But I shouldn't, I need to be more
That's a whole
pastoral
nother
here.
story,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's a whole nother story. They just don't want to come to the meeting. Or if they come, they're on their phones, they're completely distracted. Or if the one I despise the most is in a group chat, they say, yeah, sorry, can't make it. And then that affects the whole other group of people coming to the meeting. And then before you know it, 2 other people say, yeah, sorry, can't make it too. And before you know it, a meeting of 10 goes down to a meeting of 5, all because of a group chat. That's why, Pastor Matt, I never use a group chat. Don't want it. You got to call me directly if you're going to miss my meeting.
Yes. You never want to say the word group me around Pastor
Never
Conway.
at all. Never, ever. So yes, meetings without notice is a good one. Number 2.
Quiet in chats or in group discussions.
Have nothing to say. Or even in the meetings, it's a sign. They have nothing to say. They never want to open them. Now, there's difference between some people who are introverts and like to process that a little bit more. But there's some people who just come and they never contribute to the meeting. And I'm like, well, then you shouldn't be in the meeting if you don't have something to say. So please speak up and share your thoughts. But I think that's a cue for us to know there could be disengagement taking place, and we've got to be careful with that and start having a conversation. Because, Matt, and I know this one happens all the time, there are people who have swirling ideas in their thoughts that they never tell you, and they never check in. And it's usually negative, and it stays that way because we're not wise enough to see what's happening, or because we are completely disengaged and we'll just allow it to stay in their minds the entire time.
Yeah, and the danger side. Some people are naturally quiet. It's not everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But the danger is the people who are quiet in the meeting but talkative in the hallways. You've got somebody quiet in the meeting, but then you see them chit-chatting with everybody else. That might just be a sign something else is going on.
Yep, less interaction with the team or leaders. If nobody knows you, if nobody has a good relationship with you, if one of your inner circle 5 friends are not somebody on that team, then you're doing it more as a chore and a burden, not because of the joy of it. And that usually is a sign that some people kind of overlook oftentimes. All right?
Yep. Number 4, shows low energy or lack of initiative.
Go ahead.
Well, that goes with the other one. If somebody comes in, if they're quiet, if they don't interact, if they don't have energy, that speaks to something you shared with earlier today of is the leader, the best way to keep people motivated is to be motivated yourself. And if you're not motivated, then your team and your people can't be motivated.
That's it. And then the last one is delays or drops responsibility. In other words, either they're not getting their assignment done, or they're getting it done late, or Sometimes they get a half of it done, but the quality is not great, and so the whole team suffers because they're not doing their assignment well. That might be a sign that they're not passionate and they're on their way out because something is disruptive there, I think.
Yeah, and there's some signs on our handout that you can grab in the show notes or that you have if you're here. Because here's the deal with this is in relationships, this is in everything, leadership. The earlier the reason the signs are important is because the earlier you notice it, the easier it is to correct it. Mm-hmm. By the time these things have festered and it blows up, it's almost impossible to correct. So the earlier you notice, you want to document, you want to flag for team awareness, you want to audit current involvement, and prepare a response plan.
I think as a leader, we ought to call people out that have been either hiding or that you might think something is going on. And I think you do it as a team. And I think as a team, everybody starts to look for each other and look out for each other so that it's not just the leader calling people out or calling people to step up, but it's the whole team because the team knows that everybody needs to do their role for us to be a high-performance team. And if we're not, it's because the team as a whole says, I only care about my part, I don't care about the whole team response.
Yeah, and that's really the only way it really happens. I am not a San Antonio Spurs fan, but that is a Greg Popovich principle, is every so often when the team was not doing good, he would call a timeout, and instead of going in the huddle, he would actually leave the huddle and let the team figure out what they needed to do.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't always do it. That was one of the reasons that he always had great teams, was he could exit and they could still auto-correct and figure out what needed to be done.
No, that's incredible. That's incredible. All right, so then how do we begin the process of fixing this thing, Andy? What are you thinking?
Care.
Yes, go ahead.
Love, correction. You said you think we should call people out. Why do you think we don't call people out? Why, Pastor Conway, do we let it sit and fester in a room when we see the signs? Why do you think that happens?
Because a lot of people are not good with confrontation. They don't like to be the guy that is perceived as the gatekeeper. They don't like to be the guy or lady that's perceived as the one that is calling somebody to a higher standard. And that's vulnerable for some people. That's painful for some people. And it's not easy for some people. They just don't like confrontation. And I think the Bible encourages us to call people out, and in a loving and caring and God-honoring way, and just, I know you can do better than this. Let's go on this journey together, and let's step up to the plate.
Like right here, it even says start with empathy. When somebody's pulling away, don't start with expectations, start with empathy. So it's one thing to say, hey, you didn't meet your numbers, you didn't meet your goal, you didn't meet what you were going towards. It's another thing to say, hey, I see you're behind on this. Tell me how you're doing.
Yep.
Tell me what's going on, because a lot of times there's something really going on in their life outside of that, and starting with empathy helps with that.
And empathy simply means that we need to do what I call sit in the well. We just need to sit in the well with the person and be okay in the well, and be okay that nothing will get done over the next 2 weeks. Your only assignment is to sit in the well periodically with the person over the next 2 weeks, just to hear what's going on and to hear their story, and maybe to off-ramp them for a season, or to give them some kind of set time frame and say, okay, after this, if we think it's helpful, then you can come back to the team. But we need to give people that break so that they can either heal well or address the issues that need to be addressed that's causing them to pull back. I think it's huge, and I think we don't do it often enough, and I know we don't do it often enough, and we need to do a better job of that.
Yeah, and that's really what all these points are. A simple personal conversation can reveal which strategy never will, and before jumping to conclusions, slow down and make space for the heart.
Yep.
Most people that know Pastor Conway just think of him as super fast, high-paced, I'm going to plow through whatever to get the goal done. You don't always get to see him behind the scenes of when he calls me and he's got an agenda to work through, and I'm like, you'll never believe what my kid did yesterday that broke our heart, or what, and then he just pauses, and 15 minutes later, I know he called me with an agenda, but it was like as soon as he saw those signs, everything else stopped. And he's phenomenal at that. And most people don't, except for the inner circle, don't get to see that. And that's really, that's what this page is all about. It's care, connection, and sitting in a well for a moment.
Yeah, I just think we as leaders don't do that enough. Actually, here's what I think happened. I think we do it for so many people that when the other person comes, you're like, oh, God, not another one. As opposed to knowing who you really need to do it for and be present with those, 7, 8, 9 people, and then they're supposed to be that to the other people around you. But I think what we have a tendency to do is do it for so many people that you can't possibly deal with 30 people who the bottom has fallen out. It's just too many people, and it drains on you, and then you can't get the job done. And then number 2, it's the reason why everybody has to have an apprentice, because you don't know when the bottom is going to fall out. And the bottom falls out at the least appropriate time, when you don't want it to, when the stakes are highest, and when the next biggest thing you're doing is going to happen. That's when the bottom is going to fall out, and you got to have somebody there ready to do it. Now, here's the kicker. If you don't do this in your personal life, you won't do it in ministry. Let me say that again. If you don't have eventualities for your personal life, then you cannot possibly do it in ministry. If you don't have apprentices to help you, if you don't have apprentices in ministry, then when the bottom falls out, you're going to look like, you just don't care. And that will ultimately hurt the ministry over time. You have got to have people with apprentices so that when the person is down, the other person picks it up so that you can be completely present. Or what's going to happen is they're going to be out and you have to take their role. So since you took their role, you have no time to care about the person. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yep.
And I think it happens way too often. Mm-hmm. And it looks like we're not pastoral, we don't care about people, and we only care about the mission, which is not true, but it looks that way because we didn't have a system that planned for the crisis that will happen in somebody's life.
That's good. Well, not to be confused with getting in the well is departing well. It's two different wells. Getting in the well versus departing well. There comes a season sometimes where it's time to step back, and leaving well means more than just letting go. It means setting up for what's next. So when we start talking about leaving well, everybody talks about how do you leave well. How do we jump into that?
Yeah, I love this topic, and I love it because you cannot depart well when you think it's time to depart. The way you depart well is by having regular conversations over a long period of time, and what it's ultimately going to reveal is if you are in this just for you or if you're in this for the mission in the first place. That's all. Yeah. How you leave determines whether you are just for you or whether you're for the overall mission. And it also determines who God will send you to wherever you go. I promise you it does. He will send you people like you. So if you leave poorly because you only cared about your agenda, he's going to send you who's going to leave you poorly. And it will mm-hmm. always come back to you, because what you sow, you will reap every single time.
That's pretty clear. A great leader will sacrifice themselves for the mission, and a poor leader will sacrifice the mission for themselves. And that looks like leaving not well. And that's when the person is too concerned about their personal win versus the kingdom and church's win.
Yeah.
And when you can lay down my personal win versus the kingdom and church win, then that's when the door is open, when you finally submitted to that.
But it's just hard, boy, because people don't like difficult conversations, and they don't know how it's going to go, and they want to control their own future, and they don't want to trust God with it, and they want to determine, well, I think I believe now this is going to be big, and you forget that it is God who does the increase, not you, which is why you ought to say, God, I just want to honor you so that when I look, here's the important part, so when I look back, I will always have a story to say, I try to follow Christ, and I want you to do the same thing. Yeah. If you don't, what will happen to you is you won't have a story. So you will not be able to model or tell a story of how it went well for you, which is why the people under you will say, when it's my time, I'll do what you did. I'll bounce. And that's when the pain comes in. All right? So number one, have a clear conversation and set it up early. Give the people a runway. If it were up to me, I would argue, give the person above you the opportunity to determine that timeline, not you. And a lot of people don't like that because you lose control. I think when you lose control, you're dead in the center of God's will. And a lot of people don't think so. No, I'm not saying I like to not have control.
Yeah.
I don't. I like to have control. But history has taught me when you're not in control, you trust God way more. And he opens way more doors. is what I have experienced, actually. So that's what I'll say. And then, two, prepare for a successor. That is, prepare. Yeah. You should be doing this all along. Getting somebody who can do it, and not just somebody who you can dump it on, but somebody who's actually good, that can actually go further than you could, so that just when you leave, it doesn't sink the ship.
Yeah, and then you should always, that's what we should be doing.
Yep.
Having an apprentice and a successor and honoring the season. The season that's honored of whether you're leaving or someone else is leaving, it should be so honored and so well. Here's how you know a transition went well, is if you or that person is always welcomed back.
Yeah.
I've had some transitions that were not so good in my life. I've had one that was good. I had to work as a school teacher for 2 years in a rough season, and I had a great relationship with the principal of that school. But the way I knew I left well was when I left that school as a teacher, that principal said, if you ever need a job, my door is always open for you. I want someone like you here anytime. Now, praise God, I don't plan on going back there. But that was one transition where you know you've done a transition well when the door is always open.
Yep.
When doors are closed and there's not honor and there's quiet and there's this and there's that, then something's up.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. And I think that's accurate. And I think if they can't invite you back, or if you can't have a conversation, or you can't pick up the phone and call them for advice, you burnt a bridge, and that bridge will forever be burnt. And you have no idea how God would have used that person in your life in the future. And the other part of it that concerns me greatly is you don't know who will call that person and ask about you. You don't know who will call them. And I promise, there's never been a person that's left here that I haven't gotten a call. And if I have to say they worked here between the dates of this and this, any smart person knows what that means. That's all I can say. But for legal reasons, that's all I can say. But they worked here from I don't want to put any dates because it might be somebody. They worked here for the last 4 years. That's it. That's all you can say. That's not a good sign. It means that you chose to prioritize you and not the mission, which is what you said you committed to when you leave. And all you have to do to remember this is remember the first time you got the job if you're on staff full time. Just remember how you got the job and how excited you were when you got it. Which is why when you leave, you should still be excited for the person coming in behind you and the fact that you get to train and develop them to take your stuff on. But do not leave angrily when you came in excited. That means your heart has been tarnished somewhere in there. And God's always after our hearts.
I do have one question. Before we wrap up this and do some questions here, my question is, how do you know when you have someone on your team who feels like it might be time to go, they're having the conversations, how do you know when you should be fighting for that person to stay or releasing them to go? I feel like sometimes I get caught in, man, I want them to stay, but maybe they really should be released, and I live in that tension. How do you navigate that?
So the first thing in my mind that I ask is, have they completed the assignment God sent them here to do? Mm-hmm. So if they, and here's how you know you complete the assignment. It's much better than when you came. People speak extraordinarily well of you before they knew you. And by the way, it's better not in your mind. It's better in the person above you mind.
Right.
Because there are two different better. And you want the one that's better in the person above you. And then lastly, I think that there must be a sense of this sounds weird, but I have done all I can here. Once I've done all I can, then when another opportunity shows up, you've got to say, come on, you've deposited so much here, we can't wait to see what God wants you to do at the next place. Yeah. And I think that should be a sentiment, not just by one person, but by a group of people, but primarily the person above you.
That's good.
That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining us both here in person and online. We're glad to have you. And most importantly, we want you to go online to visit 1cc.com/leadership roundtable. You can download the resource, the notes from today. It's a great tool to work with your teams. So we want you to have this, listen to it with your teams, and please leave us a review and let us know how this has been beneficial to you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Pastor Conway, for sharing us. We can't wait to see you back next month. God bless.
See you guys.
Thank you so much for joining the podcast today. It has been an honor to have you here with us. Now, just want to remind you that all of the resources we talked about today are available online at visit1cc.com/leadership roundtable. Now, if this has been helpful, leave us a review, go out there and hit subscribe, and more importantly, share this with your team so that everybody can grow. We can't wait to see you next time.